Hi, everybody. Welcome to this episode of SoulFull Sessions. It is a special series called Mindful Men. And with me today is John Stahl. And he has graciously agreed to come on and talk about mindfulness in the decade of your 30s. So living in your 30s. John is a dude in his 30s living in South Florida. He has reached his third decade of life, only to find the constant existential dread will not abate for a treacherous soul like his. He works as an independent business strategist, leading others to growth and satisfaction while he continues to seek for the very same thing. This mangled path has led to many interesting events, including a journey in eSports investments and entrepreneurship. Now he resides in some unknown realm, contemplating his successes and failures, looking for another twisted path to travel while the echoes of thirsting laughter haunt his dreams. Just so everyone knows, before I get into my usual sun sign, moon sign, rising sign, and what he's known for saying, I ask every guest that comes on the show to send me a bio, which then I usually tweak and fit into this, kind of a sense of who this person is and what we're going to be talking about. And John sent me what I just read. I changed nothing because I thought it was so fun and such a great, compact summary of what so many people feel. So A+, John, if I were to grade that was awesome. Awesome. Like even when I started, as I was getting ready, I went into my normal mode and as I was looking at what I was getting ready to say when I was introducing you, I'm like, nothing that's in my head right now is fitting. So I kind of paused for a second thinking, okay, what's in my mind is not going to flow with what he said. So I'm just going to stop talking and just read it. So
cool.
That is John Stahl in his own words. He is known for saying, well, that's it, Jim. And we're going to talk about the stories behind that. Mm-hmm. And also want to let everyone know a little bit about John. And as far as his signs, I talk about everyone's sun sign, moon sign, rising sign. And it's really fun to go back and look at, where you are in the astrological spectrum. So let me just pull this up here. I thought I had it up on my screen, but for some reason it has disappeared. So I'm going to find that. And so, John, while I'm looking for that, why don't you tell us a little bit about your quote, what you're known for saying?
Oh my goodness, that's it, Jim. I use it. Well, it took me a while to figure out what actually do I say a bunch. And so, Jim originally was a dog, and it was this little Yorkshire Terrier, I think it was, and I would hang out with my friends and the dog would hang out with us, and then all of a sudden he would just want to leave, and I'd be like, oh, well, that's it, Jim. And I kept saying it for 3 decades basically, and whenever we would be out at night or something and it's time to call, be like, well, that's it, Jim. Or I would use it as a compliment, if someone figured out something or said a really good idea, I just keep saying it. And and I didn't realize I said it that much until I asked some friends. I'm like, what do you have any idea of what I say a lot? And that was the first thing out of everyone's mouth. I'm like, wow, okay, I do. Thanks. Maybe I should be
really
self-aware. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's pretty funny. So you weren't even aware that it's something you said all the time.
No. And by the third person who said it, I'm like, all right, there's a pattern here. So
yeah. I got what I'm known for saying now. So yeah, that's awesome. All right, so let me share a little bit with you about your astrology. So I asked John if he could send over if he knew what his sun, moon, and rising sign were. He did actually know his sun and moon. I was pretty impressed with that. As most folks know, I follow as of recently, early on in the podcast series, I would talk about astrology and based on the tropical system. I've since moved to the Vedic system, which is a little bit different. The timings are a little bit different, and your sun, moon, and all your signs and planets may shift based on the Vedic system.
Interesting.
Okay, so it's the tropical is based on a movement, and the Vedic system is based on a fixed system. So In the Vedic system, you are a Sagittarius sun, a
Oh,
Taurus moon, and a Virgo rising.
Virgo. I feel that's pretty different from what I'm used to
Yes,
being told. Uh,
yes. So
Interesting.
what I often tell people when they're hearing this for the first time is to embrace the idea of the what if possibility,
Cool.
and tune into the aspects of each of these new constellations to you, these new signs to you, and
Mm-hmm.
how that resonates and feels. So Sagittarius is, it's a fire sign. It's a masculine sign. It is
Interesting.
definitely one. It's the archer is
Mm-hmm.
the symbol of Sagittarius, or an arrow.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
laser focused. You have your eye on
Uh,
something. You work towards that. You don't mind working. You are the go-getter. You're going to get things done. There's a fire in you of like,
mm-hmm.
um, making change, and doing the work. It's like you're not afraid to do
Mm-hmm.
the work if you need to.
Yeah.
Taurus moon is, your moon is your inner world, that relationship you have with yourself, the relationship you
Mm-hmm.
have with your mother.
Mm-hmm.
It's a, Taurus is all about, it's a feminine sign, it's an earth sign, but the symbol is a bull. So there's some stubbornness in there. There is some, kind of firing off in a sense, but it's also about luxury. It's also about, um, taking in beauty. It's about enjoying the finer things, food and
Mm.
wine and
Oh
dance
Lord.
and song. It's like all of those things are part of you as well.
Mm-hmm.
Then Virgo rising, or your rising or your ascendant sign, is what you're here to rise into, to step into, to transform yourself in some way. And with Virgo is actually, the symbol is this, like a goddess symbol, but
Mm-hmm.
it's really about, that it's reliable, super organized,
Mm-hmm.
getting systems in place, and really tuning into the flow of nature and how that can propel you forward as well. So there's
Mm.
all these things that kind of tie in together. And when I was sharing that, I noticed like some of it you were thinking, some of it you're like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
So share with me, if you, or and the listeners, if you don't mind, a little bit about what was going through your mind when I was reading, kind of reading you, quote unquote,
Yeah.
astrologically.
Um, well, well, I find it interesting because, forgive me if I'm wrong. So, like, I been told that like I've been a Capricorn, which is more of like an earth sign,
Yeah.
and I've always been like, yeah, I guess I can see that, and because I will use the word disagreeable instead of stubborn, but stubborn, um, that I can definitely be that way, but like I never really felt like it's a good fit because I do have moments of passion, especially when it comes to interests and stuff. So a Sagittarius, and like even on the other system, I think I'm on the cusp of a Sagittarius too, so that makes some sense. So it's very interesting because like I don't know, fire is fun, and like when you mentioned Taurus moon, I thought that was kind of funny because I was thinking about it the other day. Like a lot of like my core group of friends are are Taurus, so I'm like, oh, I wonder if that has something to do with it because I always thought it was weird because I was surrounded by Earth signs, excuse me, fire signs. While I was like Earth, I'm like, how do I mesh with these people? And like when you mentioned like the stubborn part, I'm like, okay, so maybe the stubborn part isn't coming from like a Capricorn, but it's coming from a moon. And like when I chuckled was when you were mentioning like the luxury like wine and music. I'm like, yeah, that's about right.
Yeah.
So, and yeah, no, just for the people listening, I love wine. Started a wine tasting group with my friends. I go out to Cali regularly. Personally invested in some wineries out there, so wine's a very big part of my life. And then I'm still trying to interpret the Virgo rising. I've never really made it that far in astrology past the moon sign, to be real honest.
Yeah.
So
Well, maybe you and I will have another deeper conversation, maybe with some wine over,
mm-hmm.
talking over
What that
some of these
means.
aspects. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Cause it's really, really interesting and fascinating. Like once you
Yeah.
get into it. So, all right, so let's just get going here and let's get started with
Absolutely.
my opening question. I ask all my guests that come on the show
Mm.
to tell us about an experience that lit you up, where you just knew your soul was talking to you.
Oh goodness. That really lit me up. That I knew my soul. Um, that is a good question. I'd say one moment that really like lit my soul up. I have two stories. One's a little bit more like mundane, and one's another like a little bit more fun. So I was out in California, and I was out for a conference, and it was a shame because it was a video game conference called BlizzCon, which is super big and it's super fun. People are drinking fun, colorful beers and dressed up all silly, and like it was great. But I couldn't go to any of that because I was there for business. But like one moment where like I really kind of like felt my soul light up was there was this one like a private event where we were going to reveal the name of an esports team, and like I was mixing with people who like I normally wouldn't, like some like athletes, people who knew nothing about video games, and like and like normally talking about video games and stuff, for the longest time it's been pretty niche, and so it was the first time where like I felt like I was educating other people who really had no clue about what this was, and it was fun, and like we fed off our like each other's energy, and like I ended up getting to teach a former Super Bowl winner how to play this one video game Overwatch, which was just super fun, and oh my goodness, and it was just great, and it was just like it was meshing people from like the wine industry, so I was able to talk to them like, yeah, you should come play video games, and it's just no, yeah, and it was great, and like a little bit more mundane example was so at the beginning of COVID, I was trying to think of something I could do indoors that was like nice and safe. And like when I was younger, I was very into the arts and like painting, and I'm like, let's do that again. And but like I wanted to do more than just painting, so I did uh, like I would buy these like fun looking models and then paint them, and just like finding that old passion again was just like it was like being reunited with like a best friend, and frankly my first models looked like crap, but like I didn't really care because I'm like, I brought this into reality. I know like it's like mundane, but like I was so happy, so it was great.
I mean, I love that story because
Hmm.
it's tuning into what you're really called to do, or how you can
Hmm.
express yourself. And what I found oftentimes is like if you're kind of in this place where you're not sure which way to go or what to do, where you're at a crossroads,
Hmm.
when you tune back into things you used to love, like when you
Yeah.
go back to when you were a kid. And like
Hmm.
for me, I used to walk my long driveway that
Hmm.
was gravel and search for rocks. They were
Yeah.
all really technically like the same rock,
Hmm. Yeah.
granite, like this granite sort of rock, that gray. But
Hmm.
I would find the one that had the most sparkles and the nicest shapes and things. And so I loved doing that. And that was the segue for me into, my business, Karmic Kindness, where I created jewelry out of
Hmm.
stones, finding the right stones, finding the perfect thing for people, which then, obviously transformed into what I'm doing now. But it's just interesting, like, when you kind of tune back into those passion projects, those
Yeah.
aspects of you that you really really enjoyed, where it was your soul
Yeah.
talking to you and lighting you up. it's
Hmm.
always a it's always the right path. It's always pointing you in a direction, whether I don't know if you're looking to sell your art, your models that you're making,
Maybe,
but
but
you
I
did
love them
know.
too much.
Yeah, well,
I
exactly.
love
Like
them
you're
too
like
much at this point.
you're
Yeah.
connected to them. And now I'm like
Yeah.
curious. I want to check those out sometime, John.
Sure.
Um,
And
so all right, so to get to like the next kind of the mindful men piece, obviously, so
mhm.
that's the name of the show. What does the word mindful or mindfulness mean to you?
Hmm. Um, I so when I first thought of this is I didn't really know exactly what mindfulness was. To me, it was a simple definition of being self-aware, but it's really more than that. It's more than just that simple definition, and at least for me, it's being more than just like aware of like your ego, your mental self. It's also being aware of like the physical side of things, and that has been at least a personal journey I've been on, is understanding more of like the physical connection to your mind, to your ego. And like for the longest time, that is, I've really neglected that link, and it kind of comes back to like my childhood, where like I interpreted the soul as somewhat detached from the body, and the body was merely a vessel. And so I kind of came from like a really neglectful part of my body. It was very like almost the negative side of stoicism. And to be honest, I'm not really entirely sure where they came from. Like I grew up in a very um, traditional Christian background, and sometimes there, it, I'm not blaming Christian doctrine, but I'm saying sometimes in like that culture, there's a focus on the soul and less on the body, like where the body is carnal and carnal desires are looked down upon. Even though if you ask like a priest, they'd say, well, not really, but the culture can sometimes be different.
Yeah, I totally resonate with that. That's a great point. No one has brought that up thus far, as far as
Mm,
tying in the what we were taught if you were raised in a Christian
hmm Yeah.
faith,
hmm
and all of the things that they decree are a sin, are
Yeah.
inappropriate, don't do
hmm
X, Y, Z. So
hmm
I can see where there would be a little bit of a divide between your soul self,
hmm
your
Yeah.
mental self, and your
hmm
physical self, where
Yeah.
really, I guess what you're saying is it's about bringing all of those together
Yeah.
and to kind of having them all in alignment and in tune with one another.
Yeah. And yeah, and so it's like, you know, at least for me, what I kind of discovered is like the neglect of like, let's say my physical health hurts, my ability to handle stress, which then like affects other things. Or like if my diet isn't right, I have a lot of like internal inflammation, which then affects mood. And then it really inhibits the way I'm able to live my life, shall we say. And like just recognizing that there's a physical aspect to like my spirituality was a surprisingly difficult hurdle, because I always had the view of like the spiritual side trumps everything, and like if it was affected by the physical, that somehow diminishes its value, and that's not true. And like that was just, and like I that's just something I grow to appreciate the older I get. um and like I realize I can't push myself the same way I did in like my 20s, where I could go 48 plus hours without sleep to get something done or something like that. And like just the havoc that did to myself. I remember one time, I forget exactly what project it was, but like I pushed a 72 hours, and I remember one time reading like, oh, after 72 hours you start hallucinating. I'm like, that's not going to happen to me. And I saw a black cat that wasn't there. So yes. So
For those who
yes.
are wondering if that's true,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think it's
it's
vulnerable.
true.
Yes. It is.
Oh goodness.
Well, so actually, this is a great segue to, the next question, which is about strategies that you found to work best when you're in overwhelm, confusion, or high stress, particularly during these times of unrest and uncertainty. So you mentioned supporting the physical body with,
Hmm.
what food, like what food
Yeah.
or
Food
other,
adequate.
what have you found to work really well for you?
Um, for me, I've found that, especially because I work for myself, I I found that having a clearly defined schedule really works for me, because for a while I had like no schedule. And really what that would be just like a mad rush at the end of the deadline, and that's unhealthy. And but like at the same time, my personality kind of dictates that I want some flexibility. So like what I try to do is, because like I know that I'm a fairly neurotic person, and like if I let my neurosis, shall we say, get too high, it hurts like my conscientiousness. Like it's a constant battle where like if I feel like I'm in overwhelm, I have to minimize the stuff that like inflames my anxiety. So like I switch from like coffee, which I desperately love, to either like some sort of tea that just does not have the caffeine, because I know as soon as I have that caffeine, it's not going to stop. It's going to be a steady flow. And like the more anxiety I have, I can't stick to my schedule. It's harder for me to focus. So like I try to lower my intake of stimulants, of sugar, of caffeine. And then like what I what I try to do, I try to practice some level of stoicism, where I try to separate myself from the problem and see it like from a tactical perspective. And I find once I remove my ego from something, I can more like understand what's actually upsetting me and like what I may need to do to approach it. But like I I'm not the best at that. I still have some growing to do. Um, uh, and yeah, I'll be real
Well, so
honest.
with the ego part, like removing
Mhm.
yourself. So, and you were talking
Yeah.
about separating yourself from the problem and kind of, taking a
Hmm.
tactical approach. So,
Yeah.
I think removing the ego is one of the hardest
Mm.
things to do.
Yeah.
So, is there a visualization that you have? Is
Mm.
there, how do you find it, you're able to remove the ego from yourself in that moment in order to look at the situation differently?
Hmm. So like it depends on like, how do I describe this? Like the situation almost. So one thing I do a lot is, I use music to kind of regulate my behavior. So like if I find I'm in a particularly rough spot, um, I have a few like favorite songs that like I'll go to that will kind of like, and I like the sound of dissonance. So like it's mostly like metal or like hard rock or something, or like sometimes the rare electronic dance track, um, that helps like be a catharsis for that emotion. And then once I'm not dealing with that emotion, I find it a little bit easier to like meditate and then relook at the problem. If it's like the moment, um, this took some practice where like it just be something as simple as me like taking a breath and just being like, all right, and I'll just let myself kind of feel my feelings and be like, okay, why is this here? And like what I need to do. And so like I prioritize what I need to do, my top three priorities, and then I try to execute. And like part of it also is just letting go of what you can't control. And that's tough. That's something I
Uh,
still kind of like struggle with.
that is a big,
Oh,
yeah, that's a biggie.
yeah. And but like, if you keep trying to control everything, you're going to end up not accomplishing anything, and that's worse. So that's kind of what I try to remind myself of,
Yeah.
and that's still very much work in progress. And like part of all this is, so like, yeah, I just hit my third decade of life and I still feel like I've so much work to do on myself. And like a lot of the journey I've had is just letting myself be like, it's okay. It's just to keep growing. And and you know, ultimately everyone is still a work in progress. And so I try, because I'm my own worst critic, and as part of that neuroticism and anxiety, and mixing with ambition to just create this really toxic thing that makes it difficult for me to accomplish things, and I just gotta not do it. So
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up because I feel like you
mhm,
are definitely one of many who
mhm.
have that mindset,
Yeah,
or that feeling of, you have ambition, all of these things
mhm,
that you really like to do, but then there's anxiety around it as well. And
mhm,
this feeling of, wow, there's so much left for me to learn about myself, about people, about my role in the world, about why we're
mhm.
here, and all of those different aspects.
Yeah,
And likely, in the times that we're in now during this pandemic, at the time of this recording,
yeah,
we're all being pushed on a bit more
mhm,
to go within and take a look
yeah,
at ourselves and what's important and what do we want and how do we get there and what do we do.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
feel like that's a huge piece, of the
mhm,
process, is the letting go of the
yeah,
control, the letting go of the
mhm,
expectations or the outcome, and just letting life unfold.
yeah,
I think we make it
yeah.
harder than it needs to be.
Oh God, do we ever? And like I don't know, I keep thinking of like how much of this level of anxiety and expectations is somewhat of a cultural phenomena, and like and how much is this like unique to our highly individualistic Western culture, where our primary worth is what we've accomplished, trying to quantify it. And while I think quantifying things ultimately helps us improve ourselves, I think there's a potential detriment. Like I a couple of years ago, I spent some time in the Amazon off of Ecuador, and I was doing this one procedure with this doctor down there, where it was this heavy cupping, and like it was combined with a spiritual aspect. So like where because when you cup you have some bruises, and where your heaviest bruises represented some like chronic issue. And so eh, and so one of my heaviest ones were bruises on the neck, which is apparently where we store anxiety, should he tell me be true. And he's like you Westerners are so anxious. And I'm like I guess.
Yeah.
And he's like, you guys really need to like, stop beating yourself up with all these expectations.
That's a big one. Now, for
Yeah.
the listeners who may not know what cupping is, would you mind sharing your experience with that?
Yeah, so cupping is this method to release tension in the muscles. So what it is, it's either a glass or a plastic cup, and they put it over a spot in your back, and suction. So like they're like suction cups. So the whole point of it is to pull more blood flow into the muscles. And so if you remember a few years ago in the Olympics, you would see like swimmers with it down their spine. So like it was very popular for them to relieve tension. And so it's kind of a holistic practice. And while I was down there, it was recommended to me. I'm like, hey, why not? And but like this one was a little bit different than like what the Olympians would go through, where they would just have it very localized. This was like everywhere. It was on my neck, every part of my back, my legs, everything. And and they leave behind these circular bruises, and depending on where you hold tension represents different things. And the shoulders are like burden, like you feel like you have a lot to take care of. So like if something's not right in like your career or something, that might lead to very tense shoulders, which once again you see a lot in the West. The mid back is grief. The lower back is insecurity, and I found this one funny. The butt is rage, and so I did this. I did this with 3 friends, and like it was kind of funny because we were all done. We were all kind of like naked, and like I was looking at their butts. I'm like, who has the most rage?
That is pretty
And,
funny.
yeah,
That's great. Yeah, that would be an interesting experiment
yeah,
for people to do, to have some sort of sense of how much rage are you.
like internalizing or like
Yeah.
haven't dealt with, and no, so it's very, very interesting. Fortunately, we were a very relaxed crew. So, but good Lord, did it hurt? Typically, cupping doesn't, but this one was meant to be a bit more tense. And oh boy, I almost asked him to stop when it got to the neck, which is also why he said you need to relax in your life. I'm like, all right, noted.
Yeah.
You
Do you,
didn't have to torture me.
do you feel like you've done that since then?
Yes, I do. Especially because I did that again, and the second time I didn't get bad bruises on my neck, so I did make some improvements, and a lot of it was just like, all right, I'm just gonna not really judge myself where I think I should be, and really take things day by day, which was tough because I would like set goals for myself, like, oh, in this 6 months I want to do this, and like, oh my god, if I didn't accomplish that, I'm a fucking failure. And like, but it's shifting my mindset to just take it day by day was a bit tough, because I'm like, oh no, I'm not going to be able to accomplish these things. But what it did was it would make me more accurate in my daily goals. And so by letting go, I was actually able to focus more on stuff like that. And so and just for my overall mental health, that it did wonders. um and like it also made me much more sensitive to other people's anxiety, where like if someone had a little bit too much anxious aura, I'm like, I need to get out. you know like it's reminding me too much of my past self.
Do you
And
find,
also,
I'm sorry, go ahead. What were you saying?
no, and I was saying like also, I've made substantial changes to my diet. Like I had um I had way more sugar in my diet than I thought I did. Good Lord. Um, and getting over that, like I had a severe sugar addiction, and like it was scary. I've never really been addicted to something in my life, but like that like first 3 days of me like basically jonesing for like sugar, I'm like, this is a problem. Like what? And I've never had that with anything else in my life. Like even with alcohol, I've gone like 6+ months without alcohol, never really cared much. And like, but just I'm like, this is 72 hours. I can't go 72 hours without a cookie. What's wrong with me?
And then there is, there have been studies that have shown that sugar is like one of the, if not the most addictive substance that's
Mhm.
mainstream. That you can get
Yeah.
anywhere, anytime. And the out of curiosity, what was the one sugary item that you found yourself reaching for on a regular basis, that when it disappeared you were like, oh shit?
Oh shit. So it was a couple. The primary one was, I have a fond love of chocolate chip cookies, and like I would just pick up like a big thing of like $5 cookies, and but like the thing is, I would basically eat through that. And I had a fond love, an obsession over like Reese's, but like I wouldn't get them much, but like whenever I would buy a bag of Reese's, there was a good 50% chance that bag would be done by the day. And so like that's a shitload of sugar. And I still think about that occasionally. And I miss it. And another real sneak of sugar was like how much sugar I was putting in my coffee. So I tried drinking black, or like putting like almond milk in it, and not put that sugar in there, and that took a while to get used to. And just like in all the carbohydrates I ate, there's always like sneaky amounts of sugar, and really trying to like knock that down to zero was actually, it was surprisingly difficult.
Yeah.
Now I've reincorporated some sugar, but mostly through fruits, and I will eat the occasional sin of cookies. Um, but
I think
like it's
everything in
creeping back up.
moderation, you know, I mean,
Yeah,
no reason to deprive yourself of things that you love and that you enjoy. Like, have
yeah.
cookies every now and then. Have
It's
just
just
peanut
not
butter cups
killing me
every now
anymore,
and then. Yeah.
you know.
Maybe
um,
just not a whole bag.
yeah, not a whole bag. Also, it turned out, so oh my God. So it turned, I had really bad adult acne at one point, and like I remember being like 25 or something, and being like, I was told this would end 10 years ago. And
Yeah.
and like it still kept kind of following me, and I would, it turned out to really be the sugar is the line, is the point of the story. And so once I cut that sugar out, also I needed more like vitamin D and zinc. Once I cut that out, like it was gone. And I'm like, all of the money I spent on fucking dermatologists and like these super powerful antibiotics they would just give me, and and oh my God, they destroyed my gut biome. And like to the point where I remember I was doing my master's, I got so sick. My stomach wouldn't really digest things, and like if it did, I would get like super backed up. And I remember one time I just had so much stomach pain, I went to the ER, and like I had to get my system flushed out, and I had a colonoscopy. I was the youngest person there, and I'm like, what is going on? And it's, yeah, and like, and for the answer to be, oh, you just need to not, you just gotta cut sugar out. Oh goodness, I wish I could have told my younger self, don't spend all of that money.
And that, you know, that's a great point though, John, is
Mhm,
kind of talking about the body, the physical body, where we started this conversation, the physical body,
mhm,
and pulling all the pieces together. Like, who knew that at the time, you know, you didn't
mhm.
realize at the time that like what you
No,
were eating was affecting your
yeah,
skin. And then
yeah,
on top of that, the
mhm,
treatment, quote unquote,
yeah,
for it was
yeah, yeah.
antibiotics, which then led to
Even
issues,
more complications.
yeah, with your gut. And then your gut health
Mhm.
directly affects your mental health.
It does.
So I'm sure there, you know, I'm sure there were some cognitive
There,
shifts and things. And
yeah.
one of the, you know, John and I spoke
Mhm,
earlier about, you know, different projects and things that he's passionate about. And one of the things he mentioned was about modern society and mental health. And so I feel
yeah.
like all of this just so ties
Just
in
it
together.
feeds into it. Yeah, like I don't know, you know, what it is. Is so like food isn't necessarily a cure, but food is a preventative measure. So like one thing that was super interesting that I was learning about, especially because my grandmother had Alzheimer's, is the 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 brain damage that occurs to create Alzheimer's really happens like a decade before symptoms. And so like diet and all that can help mitigate symptoms, but you have to like you have to be doing that before the symptoms occur. And also like with a lot of our food, and this comes back to a personal example because my diet was so shit for so long, and that combined with a little bit of a head injury, like my endocrine system was just fucked up, and like and I didn't really realize that until I was working for one particular client, and my God, just I all of this stuff led up to a point in my life where like it was affecting the way I worked, it was affecting the way how I felt, and that was the moment. It was the moment I remember I was writing a report for these people, trying to help them, get back to profitability, and I was just not happy with my work. And I'm like, it was the first moment I felt like I don't know if I can actually deliver. And I'm like, I've delivered before. What's the problem? And I just had like intense brain fog. And someone recommended to me, yo, get your blood levels checked. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like that'll reveal anything, right? So I go and check my blood levels yet, and just was the internals of my body on fire. And like, it was actually really helpful because like one thing, I was pre-diabetic, which I didn't know, which was good to catch early. And like just a bunch of hormones in my head were wrong. Just like I was underproducing everything, and which would lead to like the brain fog I was having, the mood decrease. Well, honestly, what scared me was the mood decrease, because normally I have a pretty good mood, and but like I was just feeling like shit. And the doctor at first, she's like, we will give you some meds, but like we're gonna need to get you on a really strict diet, which was like no processed foods, and removing that pesky sugar. And and like through it, it took a while. To be fair, it took like 60 days, but like after that 60 days, I swear to God, it was like a switch, and I'm like, I felt human again. And I didn't want to become like the insufferable person, like, hey guys, it's diet. Um, uh,
You didn't
and
want
like,
that guy.
no, and like, but it made me think. It's like, obviously, I'm not the only person with like a heavy amount of refined foods in my diet, and like my metabolic health was really poor. I'm like, I can't be the only person, and like it was affecting me. It's like, who knew, like through my bad mood, whose other person's days I might have ruined because of my like bad aura, shall we say, or like just all of that. It made me think of society. It's like, can we function as a society if like all of us potentially are somewhat affected by our food environment? Because like, just looking at our food environment basically dictates what people eat. And just like, it's all like the traditional American diet is so awful. And there's this new like category of foods that scientists use. It's called like ultra processed foods. And like it's the stuff that has like no moisture, because moisture spoils foods. And so like companies will remove moisture to keep a higher shelf life. And like it's stuff that our body has more difficulty processing. And like I read this statistic where like about only 12% of the population is metabolically healthy. And I'm like, it makes me think like, if, because it affects our mood and our minds. And it's like we're making policy decisions with potentially incorrect brain chemistry that may skew our perceptions, and like on like a macro level. And we also make decisions day to day that are like, I feel like we're all not running optimally, and like what that potentially does to us. I mean, like right now, I'm not going to get political, but like right now with all this unrest, like how much of that unrest is like a mixture of like COVID, and like honestly just everyone essentially being poisoned for decades. Like I don't know. And
That's a great
yeah.
point that you bring up too, like, about everyone operating from a lower level based on what they're putting into their bodies. Their bodies are not being supported. So they're going
No.
out into the world at a lower vibration energetically
Yeah.
from their physical
Hmm.
body. And then they're
Yeah.
engaging and interacting with people, and that
Yeah.
that does affect people around them. So
Yeah.
just by changing our diets a bit, just improving
Yeah.
quality of food that we're eating,
Hmm.
directly affects our mental health, our physical
Yeah.
well-being, as well as those around us. So that's pretty
Hmm.
profound if you think about it.
Yeah. And like one thing and like the thing with diet is like the science is still so new. So like even if you are looking for answers, there's not a lot of reliable answers out there. And like one way to mitigate that, someone recommended to me, is like going like on an ultra elimination diet. So like if you're someone who's who still has meat in their diet. One thing was recommended to me is like you go with like a really healthily grown meats like free range chicken or beef, and it's fairly nutrient dense. And you go there and you stay there for a little bit, let your body like readjust, and then re-add foods. And then like the moment you start feeling bad again, then that's the food that your body just doesn't mesh with. And so like you slowly, and this process takes forever, and I personally haven't done it just because of like the ridiculous amount of time this is going to take to re-add everything and then figure out. Oh goodness. So I tip my hat off to anyone who does that. And it just shows you how difficult this is. My God.
Well,
If you,
the other thing
yeah.
I learned from one of my teachers is about the blood type diet. I don't know how many people
Oh yeah.
that, where there you can I actually bought a little kit. It's just this little, you buy it on Amazon, and it will tell you your blood type if you don't know it, or if you want to confirm what it is. And then you can look online, and I found a PDF of the foods that are optimal, neutral, and detrimental to you based on your blood type. So that might be an easier way, like the fast track.
Oh yeah.
Bring it out. This is the elimination, which is probably the most accurate as far as what your body can handle and tolerate because you're experiencing it. But you're right. Good God, that would take forever.
It would take forever. No, and it's interesting you mentioned that because I was mentioning some of this to my parents, and my mother popped out with this book about eating for your blood type, and she's like, "Here." I'm like, "Of course you have an answer." And like it was quite. All I remember, I didn't fully read it, so I'm an O positive, and like the one thing it told me to avoid was like pastas, and I'm like, I love pasta so much. And
it's funny, John, I'm also O positive. And
oh really? Okay.
What jumped out at me was to stay away from alcohol and caffeine.
Yeah.
Which neither is happening. I will happily report. Doubt that will change anytime in the near future.
Oh man.
Yeah, it is fascinating. It's really it's really cool. Yeah.
No, and it's just it just shows that finding your health is also such an individual journey, which is like romantic but also maddening in somewhat a way because it's like I want answers. Yeah, so like it just makes me think of modern society and like how it's like it's somewhat scary. It's how we just might not really know what it means to be truly mentally healthy. And like especially within Western society, I feel like we get potted a lot. So like I like we all each have our own more so if you live in a city like like New York, you have your own like it's studio apartment that's like 10 by 10, something a nightmarish, and it's like you don't know your neighbors. The only food around you is ultra refined food, and like the work you do, your boss doesn't really find you valuable, and like it's not enough to live on, and it's just it's like that's not how we are designed to function, and I don't think that's particularly good for even many people in society, and it makes me wonder. I don't know how to deal with it.
Like, what are we missing? Like, what are we doing? What can we do differently going forward in order to support our, support ourselves mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually? Shifting things like what we eat, the way we live, how we perceive things, how we receive things, which is also, another question I have for you too, is about kind of balance is huge no matter what area you're talking about. But within us, we have these masculine and feminine qualities, some stronger than others in us as individuals, regardless of what gender you identify with. So the way society is structured, talking about society again, and the way nature is structured, how have you seen this duality of like more of the quote unquote masculine qualities or the feminine qualities show up in your life? And before you answer, I just want to give a short explanation of what I mean by masculine and feminine for the listeners, depending on when they're jumping into this Mindful Men series. And that is, you know, masculine is not about men, and feminine is not necessarily about women. Masculine qualities are the qualities of action. Feminine qualities are more the action of receiving. And so it's a very different energy. It's more of that give and take sort of energy. Although women typically are the ones who are the givers, as far as of their time, their attention, their resources in that way. And however, men also are givers and they're more financial resources, things like that. It's a little bit of a different dynamic. So like I said, within each of us, we've got the masculine and the feminine. So how have you seen in your life these different aspects play out, that maybe that softer side of you versus the more like, I don't want to say hard side, but that more stoic side, and not the sense of stoicism, but just like very, this is how it is kind of thing.
Deal with it. Just kidding. And
Back it up.
You know, I find it funny. It's like when I was, let's see, like middle school age, I was kind of, no, I might have been younger, but I remember the first time I was going to play tackle football. I remember my little young head was like, why would I want to hurt the other guy? Why would I want to tackle him? That sounds like it'd be painful. And I remember, like, it took me a while. Like, I wasn't so much worried about myself. Like, I just didn't want to hurt the other team. I'm like, I know the other guy. He's a cool guy. and like, it took me a while to kind of like, and I don't know why, to tap into like the more competitive, disagreeable nature of myself. And like, because I don't know, maybe I was more collectivist and tribal when I was younger. I'm like, oh, they're part of the group, you know, I should do things, you know, for them, not like hurt them. And like, and I got over that. But
well, I wonder how many other guys have had that same experience. How many of them were a kid and they were, you know, their dad, or maybe they had the strong desire to play football, and they get out and like, wait a minute, what am I doing?
What am I doing?
I don't want to like
do this.
I don't want to take this guy down. But that's something that's not really ever talked about. Like, well, I'd be curious.
No.
Have you discussed that ever with any of your guy friends?
Any of my guy friends? No, not really. Have I? No, I don't think I have. And I was kind of like, oh, can we play like soccer instead? But like the mature point of that is like, oh, I mean, like, you both will be fine, you know, like ultimately you aren't like permanently damaging the other person's life. So like then the stoicism comes in. It's like, get over it. And I think that was pretty healthy. Like also in my life, I've had a decent amount of like female friends, and I've always been a little bit more of an empathetic listener than some of my male counterparts. But like, as I find as I get older, I get a little bit more towards the get to the point kind of a thing. And I think that also stems a little bit from like the business side of things, where like sometimes brevity and getting to the point is better than being paralyzed by analysis. And I just always kind of found it interesting, because like when I was in high school, I did a joint like martial arts class, and like whenever we would spar, I would forget that I'm like 6'2", and and like I would notice like a little bit of fear in like the people I was fighting with. I'm like, why is that? Like, I remember my teacher, he's like, bro, you're 6'2". I'm like, oh yeah. No. And Yeah, so it's like kind of like as I got older, it was more of I would tap more into like my competitiveness and like my disagreeableness, and part of it is realizing like that competitive drive to do better and like feeling satisfaction of like quote unquote defeating someone isn't necessarily, you know, negative. Because so much, I think sometimes in modern society, like competitive people are almost viewed as like toxic masculine, and I'm like, well, that's not necessarily true. Like their competitiveness isn't necessarily for themselves. It's not necessarily selfish, you know, like back when we're cavemen, you know, bringing home the more like pigs meant you and your family and your loved ones. Like a lot of competitiveness isn't derived from like sheer ego. It's like I care about, you know, the people around me and I want them to do well too, and I represent that. It's also, it has a very tribal aspect to it, and
I love that. That's a great way to look at it. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And so that's kind of how I and like connected to my competitive drive, and like realizing like it's okay to have those testosterone fueled moments of let's go. You know.
I mean, it's
um
also okay to have like a softer moment where you're
oh, for
offering
sure.
compassion to someone who's having
Yeah.
a hard time, or
Yeah.
you get
Hmm.
emotional over something that happened in your life, and you
Yeah.
allow that to come up and feel it and express it, and not feel
Hmm.
like you're lesser of a person because
Yeah.
you have.
Yeah. And like so, I think one thing, so like a lot of times stoicism and emotional control is associated with the masculine, and while it has an element of truth to it, I think the negative side of that is like the absence of emotion isn't necessarily stoicism. Stoicism is you still have those emotions, but you control it. And I feel like sometimes like a more immature man or a more immature person just snuffs the feeling out. And that's not stoicism, because that will, an undealt with emotion still has consequences. And that's something I had to deal with, because like I'd always interpreted stoicism that way, is like the suppression of emotion rather than like dealing with it and, you know, still being in control of yourself. And like, and for me that would metabolize or come out as like panic attacks. And we're like, and they would just hit me. Like I remember my first ever like real panic attack. I was in college and I was about to switch majors, and like it was a good decision. I wanted to do it, but like I had a little bit of a perfectionist mentality, and I'm like, oh, if I'm doing this, maybe I'm a little bit of a failure. And like, but I remember when that panic attack hit me, it felt so strange because like I felt neutral, but when it hit me, I'm like, all right, I need to be on the ground for a minute here. And like it was frankly scary. And like it was just a consequence of me just like not properly handling what I was feeling. And it's just it's not good. And so that was really me being on the toxic side, I guess, of masculinity, of stoicism.
Well, you brought up a good point about emotions, as far as like, undealt with emotions have consequences. And that's so
Hmm.
true, because if you aren't able to express your emotions or move them out of your body, they collect. Kind of
Yeah.
like what you're saying with your neck, all of
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
anxiety that was held in your neck,
Hmm.
they stay, and the longer they stay there, it's a breakdown of the physical body, which
Yeah.
then leads to illness,
Hmm.
chronic illness,
Yeah.
disease, areas of injury. You'll start to have injuries in different parts of your body.
Yeah.
And so doing things to move that energy out, to have an awareness that they're there, and then
Hmm.
address them, because they will show up in another way, like a panic attack, for instance.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Which
it's
doesn't serve anyone.
it does
So
not. It is.
no.
It's terrifying.
Yeah.
I personally have come close to having 2 panic attacks in my life. I
Ouch.
feel it happening, and luckily at that point in my life, I had tools. and
Good.
strategies, and I had an awareness of what was this wave
Yeah.
that was coming.
Mm-hmm.
I could see it, and I could begin
Yeah.
to feel it, and I refused to get in,
Yeah.
like, to get sucked into it. And so I was able to get myself to a place of managing it. But I can tell
Yeah.
you, the feeling
It's
of what I
good.
was getting pulled into was, it's terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you really,
Yeah.
from what I've heard, you feel like you're
Mm-hmm.
dying. Like, you feel like it's
Yeah, during the moment, you're
yeah.
like, "Oh, is this it?" And but like I was so out of tune with my emotions, like they would just hit me, and I wouldn't have like much like build up, and then like I would have like heart palpitations even when like I was feeling calm. So like it was a journey to like kind of reconnect myself.
Mm-hmm.
And like I remember I'm a pretty rational person and a skeptic in most things, but I was doing my chest was so tight. I went to a family friend who was like a very good massage therapist, and so she was trying to open up my chest, which is something I was later told that they're told not to do, and I found out why. And so she was doing that, and she's like, "Oops, I hit an emotional nerve." I'm like, "What the hell does that mean?" And I started kind of like crying a little bit, a lot, and a bunch of stuff came to mind. Like recently, I had a pet die that I was really sad about that I didn't really like let out, and she's like, "Yeah, you have some stuff you should deal with." I'm like, "Apparently." So,
Wow.
um,
So just
eh,
in her working your physical body tapped into your
yeah,
energetics, and it
yeah,
opened up all of this emotional stuff
yeah,
that was trapped.
yeah, yeah. It was kind of like a floodgate, and it's just I'm like, okay, I get it. I need a better way of dealing with these things.
So
Good
now,
Lord.
do you think that that's
Like an overarching theme for, you know, a guy in his 30s that's, you know, his
Mm,
career is like moving, there's some momentum, but you're not quite to where you would ideally want to be. There's still fluxy places in your life.
I
um
think so.
yeah, okay.
I think so because well, at least I can't speak for everyone, but I feel like, especially at this point, with a lot of guys, we derive a lot of value from our competency in the world and what we do, and like especially how other people value what we do. And if that isn't really like fulfilled, then it help causes this like anxiety and a feeling of insecurity, and especially when you hit 30. um it's almost like a lot of guys expect like this should be a pretty high earning point of my career, and if it's not, they start feeling like, oh God, am I less of a man? Did I not do this? And like it really cuts to the core. But at the same time, 30s are, also pretty great because like if you are most people do reach like a pretty good spot in their career, even though it is still relatively early, and like it adds this extra sense of security, and you're like, oh yeah, I feel effective in the world, and that's pretty great.
Yeah.
Um, sorry, and yeah, I feel like right now for me and probably other guys in my shoes, there's a lot of like, oh, now this is like life's real. you know? Um, but also I think especially for my generation, like the infamous millennials, um, I feel like there's a lot of nihilism. I don't know if that's the right word, or like I feel like there's a lot of guys like in my cohort that still kind of struggle with life meaning a little bit, and like we either find it in whatever tribes we find ourselves in, like different ideologies or our careers, and like I feel like with like a lot of millennial men, like a lot of us somewhat feel lost because we've been told, go out and find your own meaning, and I feel like we've had a little bit less structure than other generations. And like, while that isn't necessarily wrong, I think it's left some people feeling isolated. And it's very interesting. So like, at least endemic among millennials is a distrust of kind of like tradition. And while I am a millennial and I agree with that to a degree, like I you see a lot of millennials moving away from like traditional religion, and like I think there are some positive aspects to religion, especially the community, the strong community. There are still enough negatives that make it so people don't necessarily want to join it. And like, but the thing is, we didn't really think through an alternative. You know, like what other structures do we go into? What other communities do we find? And I feel like many of us have found that. And, you know, we're a very entrepreneurial generation. So we found meaning through work and like having our careers attached to causes trying to fix the nation. But I feel like sometimes we need to fix ourselves and our like local stuff over the macro. And so like I feel like just with like a lot of millennial men, we still somewhat feel lost, and like, and so like we're still kind of figuring out our way.
Do you think it's a belief or uh, a,
mm,
what is the word I'm looking for? Not disbelief. Do you think it's
mhm,
it's the thought process of there is no higher power, more of that atheistic viewpoint, or
mm.
do you think it's more of the doctrine and structure of an organized religion that has turned?
I think, well, I think it's a combination. So I think the structure turns people off. Um, but like the structure is also its like primary selling feature. Um, I think it's more of like the dogma that kind of turns people off, but also like, and this comes back a little bit to the mental health. It's is like with the way like society is kind of structured, where like it's easier for us to become like isolated, even though we're so connected with social media, and that's a different conversation. Um, and like us potentially not finding value in like careers, it 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 pushes people to kind of a thing, uh, like what I mentioned earlier, like a nihilism. So like typically I describe nihilism as something, it's not a philosophy you willingly accept, although you may think you do. It's something that finds you. So like if you're in a position where like you're detached from the world, a little bit more depressed because of all this, it's a consequence. It's a symptom of like other things going on in your life. And so like I think when you see a friend who exhibits like real nihilism, there is no meaning, you should probably check up on them. Something's going on in their life. And like you kind of see it with like with sometimes that nihilism metabolizes itself as like, now I want to tear down the system because I don't see it helping me at all. So like it's like this old African adage, those not of the tribe want to burn it down. And so like it's typically a problem with men, because we have testosterone and we might take that really personally. And but there is hope for millennial men, because I feel like a lot of millennial men they're like, all right, I feel like I do have a lack of meaning, let's go find it. And so you're seeing, you know, people do that by, you know, volunteering and like doing other things and really defining themselves, redefining exactly like what masculinity is, you know. Is it that type of emotionally detached stoicism, or something more mature, like what I was mentioning, and stuff like that? Is like masculinity isn't necessarily, you know, shaving your head and putting on that uniform. You know, it's about being competent in the world and like really being there for the people you care about. You know,
I
and
love
I
that. Yeah,
yeah.
that's really that's so true, and I think that is, you know, whether you're a man or a woman, that's something
Mm,
that's important. you know,
Yeah.
that is a part of who we are just as human beings.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Mm-hmm.
And as human beings, there are ways that we can tune into why we're here, what our soul is calling us to do. We talked about that a little bit in the beginning, where you were talking about, you know, where you felt lit up in that moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you have any rituals to help you tune into your soul's voice or bring your soul online?
Oh boy. Let's see. I struggle somewhat with rituals. But like stuff to bring my to bring myself online.
And it may
What?
not even be ritualistic. It may be just those go-to things that you do that you enjoy to help you maybe still your mind so that you can hear when your soul is talking to you.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, all right. So at least like with COVID, one thing that I guess would be a little bit more like a ritual that I think helps me is I've tried doing like walks and like runs where like I bring nothing with me, because most of the day I'm like tuned into something, and like it's one of the few moments where I really like let myself just be, and like it's pretty meditative, you know, once you get into that like runner's high, as I call it. um and I think that's a moment when I can really like let myself just be myself, like whatever thought comes up, or if it's just nothing. um and let's see, or like, or something to like awaken my soul. Huh. um Yeah, like what I said earlier, I use music a lot to like regulate my emotions, and I have a few like go-to tracks that either like remind me of like a moment where I was doing really well in something, or like just like something that really helps me like actually wake up, you know, like, yeah, and yeah, I don't know. I feel like those are rather insufficient answers, but that's all I got at the moment.
No, that's fantastic, because there may be folks out there who haven't really even thought about it, who don't even have any
Mm-hmm.
practices to help them kind of tune in to themselves, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe they didn't recognize that their morning run was
Yeah,
tuning into them
so significant,
and
right?
allowing them to listen, or maybe empty out whatever is there, you know, because you can, you know,
Yeah,
I love that you're running without anything, you know.
yeah.
Living in South Florida, you see people exercising all
Mm-hmm.
the time, every day, but
Yeah,
99% of the people out there have headsets on or
yeah.
earbuds in or some sort of something going on. Some of
Mm-hmm.
them are even like literally talking on the phone, and they're not really totally
Yeah,
present
present.
in that moment. So the fact that you go out
Yeah,
cold, nothing, that's
yeah.
cool.
And I didn't realize how important it had become until like this month, when I didn't really do it, and I found myself getting cranky. I'm like, oh, it was important, you know. Something like, all
Yeah,
right, so
it is so important to get still
yeah.
or get moving and
Mm-hmm.
get
That's important.
your mind quiet. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Movement is important. Movement, getting any
Mm-hmm.
stagnant energy out, getting it flowing so that you can let it go.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
huge, huge,
Yeah.
huge, huge. So
Yeah, we are animals, you know, that need to move. So I feel like we forget that sometimes, or at least don't recognize it. I don't know.
one or the other. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
John, is there anything else you'd like to share with the SoulFull listeners today about you, your work, your life, anything that would be of benefit to us?
Huh. Oh boy, that's a good question. Ultimately, what the real thing that I can tell you is sugar is the devil. That's the most real takeaway. Uh, um, and like I had something really profound, and it just fell out of my head, so it probably wasn't that profound. Um, hmm.
Well, but it popped.
Oh, no, no. It
Yeah.
Yeah, and another thing that I find particularly useful, and I used to think it was hokey spiritual nonsense, was is like literally like gratitude. Like look around and like see something that like you are legitimately happy about. And like for me, this might sound a little bit hokey, is like my cat that I found in a bush, and like uh, and I'll do that as like a nightly thing. So like I sleep well, because I used to not, and like I don't know, like gratitude really does work. And I be real honest, I used to think it was hokey spiritual nonsense.
Yeah.
um yeah, but like it has to be legitimate though. You can't just be like, oh, this, you gotta find something that like, legit you're happy
Well, I think
about.
it's connecting, to
Yeah.
come full circle,
Hmm.
connecting, that feeling of
Hmm.
gratitude to something in the physical world, and you're feeling it in your physical body. It's bringing all of the
Yeah.
pieces together, the mental, emotional, and spiritual, physical, all of that into one, and literally increasing your vibration, helping you tune into another level of your human existence with gratitude. It is for
Yeah.
sure the gateway to upping your vibe, going into
Yeah.
that high vibe state. So that's an awesome
Yeah.
that's an awesome suggestion.
I'm gonna stick with that for
Okay.
now.
Well, John, I want to thank you so very much for coming on the Soulful
Absolutely.
podcast, the Mindful Men series, and sharing your thoughts, your life, your experiences, your insights. I
Yeah.
am certain that the people listening are really thinking about things differently, are tuning into their themselves in a different way. They now understand sugar is the devil, as you said.
Yeah.
Maybe that could be a new your new
My
what
new thing that I say.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But I mean, that is valuable for folks who may not really be paying attention to that. Maybe have an
Yeah.
awareness around how much sugar they're taking into their body and how it's affecting them, and on so many levels. So again, many, many thanks and gratitude to you for coming on, and so appreciate it. So
Yeah. Thank you.
uh, yeah, so that's it. Thanks everyone for listening to this episode of Soulful Sessions with John Stahl during this Mindful Men series. Catch you here next time on Soulful Sessions.